So good evening, everyone. Welcome to Autism Connect's Facebook Live series, and I'm happy to be part of this, Facebook Live series by the Autism Connect organization. So today, what I have to share with you is about mediated learning experience, and the idea being that we want to enrich thinking in our children and individuals on the autism spectrum. So we only have an hour. It's a really large topic. It's a topic that I'm very passionate about. So I'm going to try and see how much we can cover in this hour. I'm going to keep it, just enough so that you begin to think about it. You begin to connect it with your personal experience and think about how you can use that in your work with your child or your clients in helping them become thinkers and independent learners. So let's move forward. And what we'll do is also keep, the questions, if that's okay, to the end of the session. So you can keep entering your questions in the chat box, and Autism Connect will share that with me at the end of the session. And then we can run through them, one by one. So my name is Sowmya. I'm a speech and language pathologist by profession. I'm also the co-founder for Five Incorporated, which is a pediatric therapy service organization. So how did I come across mediated learning experience? And I think I want to share that, just for a couple of seconds, because it's really important to me, especially because it completely changed the way I started my career, started the way I was looking at intervention, started the way I was thinking about how I can help children and their families. Excuse my throat. So I just wanted to quickly share that. So when I completed my master's in 2001 and I started, working, I came out thinking that I had all the theory I had, and I had a certain amount of skill set and knowledge. So I'm ready to go out and start helping families, with children on the autism spectrum. And as soon as I actually got down to the ground and started working, I learned very quickly that I was barely equipped. And as I was working with more and more families and children, I realized that there were lots of gaps that I was not able to understand, I was not able to address, I wasn't able to help them with. I was, sometimes we were focusing so much on the goals that, we were, and you would see that the child's doing really well in therapy, but they're not able to take it out. The family is not able to, help the child in the same way. Something was missing where what was happening inside of therapy and what was happening outside, there was some kind of a disconnect. And I realized that the idea of intervention and progress is not for the child to do well in, four walls in a therapy session for 45 minutes and not be able to take those skills outside in their real life, in their day-to-day life. So then I started wanting to learn more about this. And I had the good fortune of, working under Mrs. Lalita Ramanjan, and she introduced me to the concept of mediated learning, and it completely changed the way I look at how, we understand information, how we learn. And that's what I want to share with you today. So we won't go into too much theory. We'll just look at it a little bit because you need to understand. Some of you may already be familiar with mediated learning experience. for many people, it might be new. So we'll just cover a little bit about it, the theory, but I will try and constantly connect it to the actual work that we do. So this is me, this is 5. And as you see, we'd like to use a tagline of enabling happy connections, because ultimately that's what we all want. We want to enable more and more happy connections. We seek happiness, right? We gravitate towards things that make us happy. We, want to do things more if we have it, it gives us a sense of happiness. So that's what we want for our children as well. We don't want them to look at it as activities or tasks or something that they just have to sit down or do it because, we're expecting them to do it or we're making them do it. We want them to have happy experiences. We want them to have happy connections with what they're doing, with the people around them, with their environment. So ultimately, that's what we're looking at. And when they develop more and more happy connections, that's when they want to get out on their own and do more on their own. And that's what I said in the beginning, that we want them to become independent learners and independent thinkers. And that's where I felt mediated learning experience made a big difference in how I started to help these children and families. So the whole concept of mediated learning experience was introduced by Professor Ruben Feuerstein. He was a clinical and developmental cognitive psychologist who started working with a lot of immigrant families, children way back when families, the children that who did not have any, access to learning, or had very, very limited stimulation in their early years. And the more and more he started working with these children and understanding the learning process of what's happening, why are some of them able to learn certain skills, why are some of them not able to, and he started digging into the why of it. And that brought him to understand that intelligence, as it was earlier understood earlier, is not static. It is an open dynamic system, which means intelligence is continuously developing throughout our life. It's not that what we learn at the early years, that's it, there's no more learning after that. And it's not that what we learn and what we know is all that we can use. So we as human beings have a unique propensity or potential to change. So every time we are put in a new life situation, every time we are put in a situation that challenges us, that is demanding, we have the potential to change. We have the potential to change our thinking, to find solutions, find a way to move forward. And this is what intrigued him. And this is why he started looking more into dynamic intelligence and working around that. So he came up with this theory of structural cognitive modifiability, which is the ability of the human mind to structurally change. He believes that we can create structural changes in terms of neural networking, building more neural networks with, constant mediated learning, which is what we will look at. And the theory of, structural modifiability, he believed that it equips us as learners to have a better understanding of the process. It's not just about how do I complete a task, it's the process. Do I understand what I'm doing, what's expected of me, what I need to do, what kind of skill sets do I need while doing that task? That entire process, he, realized was way more important, because from that process, we extract rules and principles, and we use that experience to develop newer tools for our further learning. And he looked at, structural cognitive modifiability like a three-legged stool. So he looked at, three main aspects of it, which is the little bit of theory I said we look at, the cognitive functions, there's a cognitive map, and then the mediated learning experience. This one sheet, when I came across the first time, really blew me away in many ways, because it really got me thinking about, okay, this is what it takes for learning. So, we present a child a task, say, for example, a puzzle, which is a very common, if I'm talking about early years, or, we present a child a puzzle, we want the child to figure out how to, put the pieces together. And when the child's struggling, when the child's not able to get that, very often, we also struggle in helping the child understand how he needs to do the puzzle. We might be directive in our, instructions that, oh, turn it around, look at this, put these two together. So we might be directive. we might try to get the child to understand that, see, the same colors go together, or we find ways to help the child in ways that we know. And what Feuerstein looked at more importantly was, how is the child looking at that entire piece of information he has at hand. So if he has this puzzle, how is he, what is the input, how is he taking in, does he have a clear perception of what the task is about, what are all those pieces about, is the child able to systematically search that information. We're not going to run through all of this, but just to give you a little bit of insight. And once the child's been was able to take in those that information, say for example the last one, two sources of information. So you have the shape of the puzzle, sometimes it's flat on one side or two sides, sometimes it's got these small cuts, and where does it go in, and then you have an image on the puzzle, so which means you need to match the image. So there's multiple pieces of information that the child needs to take in at that time. And then comes, what does the child do with this puzzle? Does the child understand, this is what I meant to do, this is the problem, these are my cues, and this is what I need to do? Are they making a mental plan of how they are going to actually approach that? Do they understand the similarities? Do they understand that, or if it's a puzzle of an animal or a girl, the head goes on top, the legs come down. Are they making that mental plan? We do a lot of self-talk. That's what it's about. And then we look at the output phase. So the child's taken in that information, the child's trying to process and understand what he needs to do with that information. And then, is the child able to, so the output is what we see outside the performance, right? Whether the child is doing trial and error, sometimes they try and shove that piece of puzzle inside, and then if they know it's not going in, then they may turn it around. Or are they trying to use visual transport, which means that without actually turning the pieces, are they able to mentally turn that piece around to say that, okay, this fits into this groove, or oh, this is an edge, so which means it needs to go at the corner of the puzzle. So this really helped me to understand in terms of how is the child or the individual looking at that, rather than me having a goal and then expecting the child to just follow that. So understanding these cognitive functions was really, really useful for me in helping the child address any, it's not just puzzles, it is any information that they come across, in terms of how the child actually understands and processes that information. And then he looked at the cognitive map, and so I have two screens, so that's why I might shift my eyes. So 7 aspects of cognitive map he looked at in terms of things that are involved when it comes to presenting a child information, or when we engage in anything. So one is the content, right? So for example, okay, we'll just run through this and then we'll look at an example. So content is around which the mental act is centered. So for example, now again with the puzzle, that's the content. So this is what we're meant to do. The modality is, what is it? How is the information communicated? So are we using gestures? Are we using verbal mode of communication? Are we just instructing the child? Are we showing the child? Are we actually using the child's body kinetic, to help the child maneuver around that puzzle? Then the phases we already looked at, which was the input, elaborate, and output. The operation, is in terms of the mental process used by thinking about all the rules that we already know. Does the child understand and identify the pieces that, oh, what I see in the box and what I see here, is that the same? The comparison is the same. If it's categorization, okay, that, if it's a puzzle of, a scenery, oh, clouds go on top, these are all, trees, these are people, these are things. Is the child able to categorize it? Are they able to make mental analogies that, oh, I've seen this somewhere, right? And the level of complexity in terms of how is it at the level of the child's ability. And again, the level of abstraction. If it's a puzzle that concept itself is very vague for the child's never come across it. He's not able to connect those, pieces of the puzzle. He's just not able to connect that picture at all. He's not able to relate to it. And the level of efficiency. How quickly is the child able to do it? What is the precision with which he's able to do it? And how much effort is required for the child to be able to arrive at that, problem solving. Another example that I'd like to look at, when we're thinking about this is, let's look at, social play, right? That by simply putting the child in a group, they're not going to automatically, develop their social skills. So if we have a child who has, challenges interacting with peers or playing with peers, it doesn't mean that the child will, you start group therapy and put the child into a group and you do multiple activities, the child's going to automatically pick up, those social skills. The child, that there's something that's blocking the child from being able to engage with peers the way, he or she should. So for example, if the child's not taking turns, so if you look at the operation, right, whether the child even realizes what is involved. So if it is a game of football and they're supposed to stand in a line, each one goes, kicks the ball, and then comes back. But the child loves football. He wants to kick the ball. He's so excited about kicking the ball that his focus is only the ball. That his, understanding of that game is, I like this ball, so I want to kick the ball over and over again. So which means he's not paid attention to the social scenario there. He's not paid attention to the fact that this is, something that we're doing as a group. We're going to take turns. I am going to get my turn. When we talk about abstraction, for example, if you say, oh, you'll get your turn later, later is a very abstract concept. So it's very hard for the child to understand. But if we say that, okay, we have Divya, we have Rahul, and we have, Sumi, and if you will get your turn after this, it's easier for the child to connect to say that, okay, this is, when I'm going to get it. So the level of abstraction is also very important for us to pay attention to. So sometimes as adults, we are on autopilot mode. We do a lot of things that we just presume the child will understand, or we just presume that he'll pick it up as he goes. But at every step, we need to stop and see what's happening with the child. Why is he or she not able to get what we are trying to get them to understand? So that's really important for us to constantly stop and check and recheck in terms of what's going on with the child, not just keep moving on with the activity because we have goals that we want to achieve. We have milestones that we want the child to catch up with. At the end of the day, it's the child first. He needs to enjoy what he's doing. He needs to connect with what he's doing. He needs to see purpose in what he's doing. And then, he might want to do it on his own, which is going to take him, take him up on a much longer route than doing something for the sake of us in terms of, okay, I'll do it now because, they said stop, they said no, so I'll stop my behavior for them. But then he may not be able to, he may not show impulse control later because he didn't understand why he was not, supposed to do it. Why did they say stop or why did they say no? So again, that's where it's important for us to think about the cognitive map of the child. Now we move on to the third leg, which is a mediated learning experience. So learning, how do we all learn? Either through direct exposure to stimuli, or through a mediator. So for example, if I'm walking and then I happen to bang into a table, I, hurt my leg on a table. That's an experience I had. And I realized that, oh, I know this is the table that hurt me and this is what happened. I went too close to it. So next time I need to move around the table. But sometimes, and a lot of the children who we work with and a lot of our children on the spectrum do not realize that. So that's when they might need a mediator to bring their attention to the fact in terms of what happened. That, this is, what. So because if they don't notice it on their own, they might need help in raising their awareness of what happened and the situation, and then the problem solving and the solution to deal with that situation on their own later. So mediated learning experience aims to enhance independent learning and independent thinking. It looks at promoting metacognition, which is thinking about thinking. I said that we do a lot of self-talk. That if I'm, I take a pen and I'm writing, and then it stops writing, and it's anything I do and it just won't write. I have a quick, thought in my head. I have a quick conversation in my head. And, oh, what happened? I thought it had, ink in it, or I thought it was working, or it was working just now. So there is a certain amount of thinking about thinking that happens. And we slowly want to reduce the dependence on mediation, which is what we otherwise do as prompting or cueing. So we slowly want to reduce that dependence on mediation so that they can become independent learners or thinkers. Yeah. Applicable to all, because we all, have to learn in either one of these ways. So quickly looking at it, we have, just to give you an idea, right? So if the stimulation, for example, the stimulus is maybe a trip to the zoo or reading a book, and if we have a mediator, and that mediator asks questions that help the child to see what's there, brings the child's attention to it, or brings the learner's attention, helps the child perceive what they see, connect to their life, then the learner's mind might start shifting to that information, might start paying attention to that information, might that metacognition might start thinking about that information. And then the mediator again helps the child to process that information by applying it and problem solving it later, right? And then we see the response where this child or learner starts to utilize what they have learned in other daily life situations. That versus if there is no mediation for a child who or learner who already struggling, the learner has an experience, so has taken a book, just going through that book, flipping that book around. There's no mediation, there's no one engaging with the child during that learning process. What do we see? The learner may observe some detail, may pick up a few things because they have a good vocabulary of nouns, might identify it, might label all of it, but does not notice the details and is not thinking about the details that they saw. That, oh, I've seen this animal before. Oh, I've seen this boy looks just like my friend at school. And again, during that learning process, if there's no mediation, if there's no one helping or influencing the child's learning, the learner's experience, what they went through, that time that they spend, maybe half an hour the child is flipping that book around, it's not experienced because there is no knowledgeable response. So if the child has not really engaged with anyone to share that learning experience, that learning experience has really not gone beyond what the child was already doing with the book. So that's where the mediation makes a difference. So when we talk about mediated learning experience, for instance, coined the term to describe a unique mentor and mentee. So the mentor is the mediator and the mentee is the learner. And what we're looking at is not teaching concepts, teaching skill sets, but to improve the individual's propensity, potential to learn by enabling the learner to become more aware about their own cognitive processes, which is what they already know, what they already have, all this vocabulary that we have. Very often I have, families telling me, oh, he has all these words, but he will not use it to communicate, right? It's very need-based communication, or his vocabulary is fabulous, but when he needs to, have a conversation, when he needs to talk about what happened, when he wants to go and, find a way to be part of, a friend group, he's not able to use that vocabulary, use that information to engage in social interactions. So this is where mediated learning helps in terms of what we're doing is not constantly teaching newer and newer and newer skill sets, but we're making the learner aware of what they already know and what they can do with the knowledge that they already have and how they can use that to learn newer skill sets, learn newer, develop newer learning tools, and how they can independently engage in their environment. And this contributes to higher levels of functions. So the mediator is the person who comes in between the child and the stimuli, right? The stimuli could be anything, like I said, objects or experiences or learning materials. And what we're helping is for the child to facilitate the child, helping the child to assimilate, take in all that information if the child's not able to do it on their own, or the learner. So the mediator might select, frame, organize, and schedule the appearance of the stimuli. So for example, if you have so many toys that you want the child has around them, but you want them to look at the book, you might move things away. You might just take that book alone. In that book, if you just want the child to focus on a specific piece of information, that, oh, I just want him to look at the elephant, or I just want to talk about the colors in the book, or I'm just going to talk about the emotions in the book. So we select the kind of information that we want the child to start paying attention to, and we organize it. And we accentuate, which means we boost up some of the stimuli and we ignore some of it, depending on what we want the child to learn more about or become more aware about, and what the goal of the interaction is. I often tell families that, when we're engaging with the learner or the child, don't have too many goals at the same time. I want him to learn, do this and say this and show me this and be able to explain this. Pick one goal at a time. At this time during my interaction, what is it that I want the child to do? So just pick one specific goal, so then makes it easier for you to plan, what do I need to do to help my child to pay attention and learn and understand that particular information. always parents are the first mediators for the child. Like we say, parents are the first teachers. Parents are always the first mediators because they are the people who are with the child right at the early years. And in those cases, often mediation could be spontaneous, could be unplanned. You're really not learning about all of this, but you're already showing your child thing. You're already introducing your child to, information. You say, oh, look at this and look at that. And you are introducing your child to lots of learning subconsciously. And sometimes this could come from your belief system or what you think is important for the child or the family dynamics around you. So it already happens in a very unstructured and very casual way right from the beginning. What we want to look at now is when the child, as the child is growing and developing, if there are certain areas that the child's struggling with, how can I start to structure this mediation a little bit? Again, we're not going to go into all of it because it's a lot of content to look at, but there are 12 criteria to mediated learning experience. But we're just going to look at the three that you see in the center, which are the three essential characteristics. One is intentionality and reciprocity, meaning, and transcendence. So we're going to look at just these three. So what do these mean? Intentionality and reciprocity. So when we are, interacting with our child and when we are trying to get the child to do something, right? We know why we want the child to do that. We know why we're expecting the child to do that. We know why we're pushing for that particular, a goal or skill. Does the child know that? Does the child know that this is what your intention is? Or does the child just look at it as something that they're making me do, they're asking me to do? Let me just get done with it. And the reciprocity refers to the mediators. As an adult, as the mediator, am I aware, am I alert to how the child is responding to the intention? So is the child's intention then matching my intention? Are we on the same page? Or the child's really not, bothered. He doesn't really care so much about what I'm showing him or telling him. So that's really important for us to be in tune. As much as we want the child to be in tune with us, we have to be in tune with the child to understand and see, are they on the same page as us? Are they, interested in the same thing? Are they paying attention to the same thing? We'll again just look a little bit at just three elements involved in influencing intentionality and reciprocity. So as the mediator, my language, my pace, the pitch, the actions, all of that. For the learner, the child's attention span, their interest level, their availability. When we say availability, are they actually cognitively present in that interaction, or are they doing things on autopilot? They've heard this before, they know what's expected, they're just doing it as rote. Sometimes they just say things from rote memory. So are they actually there in that interaction with us is really important. And the stimulus or the presentation of the ideas, right? In terms of how often is it presented to the child, what modality? We talked about modality, right? Whether it's verbal or pictorial or gestural. So that's also really important. Let's use an example here, which is a very, very common, thing and it's a very day-to-day interaction, greeting. And a lot of our children, on the spectrum, while they know hi, the word hi, it's very often not something that comes naturally to them. If someone says hi, or you say hi, say hello to auntie, say hello to uncle, or say hello to your therapist, they would say hi. So that's again, something that, and we always wonder that every day we're doing this, every time we're doing this, but the child doesn't still seem to be doing it on his own. He constantly needs a prompt to greet somebody. That's where we go back and we think about, do they see the intent? Do they see purpose in actually having to greet a person? Do they see that, oh, this person has looked at me, they're talking to me, they're greeting me, they're waiting, which means they're expecting a response from me. And that's where, something like mediated learning experience comes in. Once we become aware whether the child's intentionality is also there, and whether the child's looking somewhere else, something else caught their attention, or they're interested in something else. So the person in front is really not important to them. How do we get that alert? How do we, connect to them? How do we get them to connect to the adult who they need to greet? Meaning refers to the mediator helping the child to acquire personal value. So, we talked about the greeting. Do they see a purpose in and importance in engaging in this learning activity, that, oh, when I meet someone, maybe after long or for the first time, I say hello because they're excited to see me. I'm seeing them after long. I like this person. Or, so that engagement in the learning activity where the child understands there's a purpose in it is really important. Fushan said that an effective mediator. So, as an effective mediator, I need to be able to help the child to understand, why are we learning this? What is this for? What am I going to do by learning this? Let's take another example of writing. Right? We all want our children to write. We pick up on writing skills. We do practice sessions and make them write sheets and copy and all of that. Does the child see purpose in writing? Does the child see, why am I having to do this? So if we help the child to see that, oh, you can make your own shopping list. So if you're going to the store and there are things, snacks or toys that you want, and you can make your own list, and writing is one way to make your list. Or if there are people that you like and you can make cards, birthday cards, and they'll be really excited and they see that shared joy. They see somebody, really excited about that little card that they wrote, writing their names, learning to write their address, maybe making labels on things they're really interested in. Then they see a purpose in it. So connecting everything that we are trying to, introduce to them in a way that makes sense and has meaning to them. And then we have the transcendence. Transcendence is, again, how the mediator moves beyond the immediate goals and helps the child to start applying these in different contexts. Like I said, for example, with the writing. Another example could be story reading. So, we all use storybooks with our children. I'm using the word or term children often because that's the larger, profile of families I work with. But learner, anyone who's learning, whether it's a child or an adult, anyone we are working with, anyone we're helping with, this applies to all of them. So, for example, with a storybook, and then you have a story, and then you're trying to read the story to the child. You've read the story, you've read the print, you've showed the pictures, but this child just cannot recall the story, cannot tell you the story, or still, is stuck to picture identification. So, in every page, they'll say, oh, this is this, and this is this, and this is this. But they're not able to connect that the story is about this person, and this is what's happening to the person, and what there is a problem that happened, and now there's a solution, and then, how the story ended and what was the purpose of the story. So transcendence is when we are able to, one, remember we said intentionality and reciprocity, and then the child sees meaning in it, and the child starts connecting to what he sees in the story to his own life. That, oh, this happened to me, or, oh, I've seen this before, or, this is an emotion that I have gone through. So we start connecting the story and what's happening in the story and the details and the characters and the setting and where the story is happening and timelines, constantly connecting it to the child's life and beyond the here and now. That, oh, what might happen if you try this, or what might happen if, things go differently. So getting the child to then start using that information to think about different possible endings, different outcomes, different problem solving, strategies. And some of the aspects that influence, mediation of transcendence is finding general rules or patterns that apply to related situations. That, oh, if we are, so, if there's a child and the child's crying because, it's a birthday party and he wants, does not want balloons over there, and he's really, really upset. So then we look at, general patterns. Oh, look at, other birthday parties or other pictures or other videos. And what do we see most often in birthday parties? Right? So getting the child to begin to look at things that, that it's not just them. The spotlight is not on them. These are things that happen in the environment around. These are things that happen to everybody. Linking events across time, what happened before, did we do that, where have we seen balloons before, and oh, we're going to the park, do you think that balloon guy will be there, and should we buy, I want a red balloon, do you want a green balloon? Again, because of the time constraint, I'm oversimplifying it, but just for you to get a crop and an idea about it, and hopefully then you will go and read up a little more and use it in your work. And encouraging reflection to build a deeper understanding. Again, that self-talk. Again, that metacognition, getting the child to think about. So instead of asking a question and giving the answers, the child says, "Oh, what happened? What do you think happened?" We throw the question back at the child. because then we are able to get information that will allow us to see how much the child is understood. What is the child's perspective? I explain something to him. How is he actually taken in that information? Has he understood it the way I wanted him to understand? And thinking laterally about experiences and issues, right? Again, thinking about it in terms of across spectrums, across situations. So essentially, this is what we commonly call as generalization. I think many people who've been in therapy will understand the word generalization. But this goes a little beyond and goes a little more. So we do spend a lot of time on transcendence when we're using mediated learning experience, while working with children or learners. Again, just to give that example of, the puzzle, there's lots of pieces. The child's really confused or is not interested, is bored, or he's done this puzzle. He can close his eyes and do it. It's really, again, we want to think about, does he see a purpose in it? Or, you love butterflies. Okay, let's find a puzzle about butterflies. Do you understand the parts of the butterfly? And what did we see then? And what was the color of that butterfly? And how did that butterfly look? And the wings? And so then we start connecting to things that the child might relate to. And then in transcendence and with meaning, we begin to help the child. Again, not direct instruction. We're always pulling out information from the child. What do you think about these two? Like, what is same about this? What is different about this? Do you think it would go together? And often another thing that we tend to do as adults is we only stop when the child's done something wrong. Oh, what happened? No, 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 this is not right. It's really important that even if the child did something well, oh, how did you know that? Oh, that was really good. How can we do this again? So even if the child's done something well, the child needs to be aware that, oh, this is why what I did, and this is why those two pieces went together, or this is why it made sense, right? Like I said, we already talked about this, that if it's a tail, that's where it goes. If you have edges, if there are two flat edges, then that goes to a corner. So building the child's awareness and not looking at puzzle as a task completion. You take a puzzle, we just need to somehow get the child to complete. So these activities, and I often tell this to a lot of families I work with, the activities, the materials are only mediums for us to help the child with their learning process. So really don't focus on the activity per se. What is your goal? I want my child to understand the parts and the whole of, an animal or, a person. Or I want the child to understand the concept of corners, to know which pieces, have a corner or not. So pay attention to that, work around that. And then eventually, if the child gets a puzzle or, is sitting with a puzzle or anyone, even if it's a new puzzle, they will figure out what they need to do about it. Now, based on the theory of structural cognitive modifiability, Professor Feurenstein came up with three aspects, which again, we're just going to sort of run through. We are not going to look at it too much in detail. But the first one is the evaluation, which is the dynamic assessment part, which is learning propensity assessment device. And then we have the instrumental enrichment program, which are worksheets, and that's what we use. But again, not saying that you need to get all of this. So for today's session, I just want you to go back thinking about that concept of mediated learning and how you can use it across any interaction with your child when you're trying to get your child to pay attention or learn any sort of information, whether it's, a concept, whether it's colors, whether it's, social skills, anything. So just in terms of how should we change the way we're presenting information, how should change the way how we're approaching the child in that learning process is what I'd like for you to go back with. But yes, because this is all part of, the mediated learning, I wanted to share that with you. So we have the dynamic assessment tool. It's called the learning propensity assessment device. We have the intervention tool, which is instrumental enrichment program. And then we have something called shaping modifying environment. So looking at how an environment, modifies learning. We're not going to run through this, but I just wanted to give you a quick example of, what an assessment tool, an assessment process in the learning propensity assessment device would look at. So it's none of it is score-based. We're not looking at what the score of the child's intelligence is. We are not highlighting what the child cannot do. What we do is present information, see how the child's first engaging and, being able to address that material or that stimulus. If the child's struggling or where the child's struggling, we provide a certain amount of mediation. we see how the child's learning process is when we stimulate the child, what the child's stimulability is, what the child's learning potential is. When you provide that mediation, is the child then able to pick up the information? And now being provided with that learning opportunity, does he do the task differently? Does he approach that, assessment differently? So, for example, this is not the actual test because I can't do that. I'm just giving an example of some of, so I've made up my own set of words over here. So this is an auditory memory test, right? So I'm just going to read out the words to you. Now, of course, I'm just showing it to you. But if I read this out to the child and then I tell the child, okay, tell me all the 16 words that you wrote. It could be hard at the first go. We might read it once more. Again, if the child's struggling again, then we do the mediation. So in this, again, at the risk of oversimplifying it, what we're trying to get, the child to do is pay attention to the kind of words that he or she heard. And is there anything same about it? Have you heard these before? Are you familiar with these words? Are any of the words, do they go together? So we start talking slowly about building up to categorization. I know, how many of these words do you think? So if you look at this, for example, we have 16 words, and I've put in 4 fruits, 4 utensils, 4 toys, and 4 furniture. Now, when the child starts mentally grouping this, then when they hear the words again, they're more likely to start already putting them into those categories, putting them into the group. And I have personal experience of actually seeing the children being able to, recall these words much, much better. Maybe not all 16, but definitely there is a big change in the way they're able to pay attention and recall the words when there is a certain amount of thinking that has gone in. They've become more aware of what the words are. They've become more aware of what they expected to do. How that problem solving has come in now. How can I put the words together? How can I group them together to remember it, right? So this is just an example again. When we look at instrumental enrichment, which is the intervention tools, so there are a lot of worksheets and different sets of tools, for across ages. So as you see over here, it's not just for children. It starts from age of 3 to 10 and 10 through adults. So you have different sets. So here again, I would just share. So this is one of it. For example, it's called organization of dots. So if you see in the first frame, you have 2 squares and a triangle. And then in the next set of frames, you have a lot of dots. The child is expected to connect 4 dots for square and 3 dots for triangle. And with each frame, the complexity increases where the dots start to superimpose, they change in orientation, the child cannot turn the paper around. So which means visual transport. The child now needs to think about, okay, that if it's a square, then it's all sides are equal, which means the dots need to be placed equal at equidistance from each other. Sorry. This is another one. So like I said, there's a whole lot of different sets of tools that cover, a lot of the cognitive processes. So this one, for example, is called empathy to action. So there's one which is identifying emotions that helps children, to where a lot of our children are able to label the emotion, but they're not able to identify it and connect it to a situation. So they might, say if they see a newspaper article and then there's, a family over there who's just got a car and they're, standing next to a car and they're happy. They might be able to say that they're happy. Oh, boy is smiling, father smiling. They might even connect the relation. But the fact that maybe they're happy because they got a new car, the fact that they're all next to the car and maybe they have the car key or, that, connection is very often very hard for, children on the spectrum to make. So this is again helping the child work on those aspects. So from that, we come to empathy to action. So if you see a scenario and if you see what are the different possible solutions to that scenario. So over here that you see, there's one boy hitting another boy. And would you just stand and scream? Would you just, watch? Or would you go and help? This is not the full sheet, let me tell that. It's got more images. But this is just to show you what it's like, the tools are like. When we're talking about shaping and modifying environment, often what we do, and especially for children, who have sensory, processing challenges, they go through sensory overload or, challenge with emotional regulation. We try and adapt the environment. We try and make, certain environmental modifications to make it easier for the child. Not saying no, yes, we need to do that. But also simultaneously, we need to start working on active modification, where the focus is on helping the child or the individual raise their understanding and their adaptation to the environment so that they can start to function, learn to function more effectively. So home is a very protected environment. School is still, some schools are very cooperative, some schools are very adjusting. They will work with the therapists and the families to make certain environmental modifications or material modifications. But then what happens after that? When the child has to go out into the world and get a job, build relationships on their own, maintain relationships on their own, it becomes a sudden big gap, and the child sometimes is suddenly lost, or the individual adult is suddenly very lost. So while yes, we're making environmental modifications to make things easier for the child, we must also think about active modification to help the child start to slowly adjust. So like I said, in terms of giving the children the sensory experience that they need, yes. But if you look at the other picture, where we are providing using home environment, using day-to-day life skills, where we help the child to use those sensory seeking, sensory stimulation, sensory experiences that they need to make it more productive. So we include all of that in their everyday functional skills. One other example I'd like to maybe use is, sometimes I have families who would say, in school assembly, the child has to stand in a straight line, but then he's not willing to. So what is done is the child is isolated. That, he doesn't like it. He can't stay in line, or he's closing his ears and he doesn't like the noise, or, he wants to keep running away. So then either the school says, oh, don't send the child for assembly, send, him after assembly, or then maybe let him, wait outside. And, then we can think about it later. But what we need to do is start thinking about what's causing that behavior. That's a mediation, and help the child to understand the social expectation, and help the child to come up along with the child, build coping strategies that we can slowly find a way to integrate him back into that. So these are just a couple of examples of how, say if you look at the middle one with the child sitting on the, floor, this is a child who we have started engaging him in using his own visual schedules. So he started to resist visual schedules. He was not very happy. Oh no. So then when we started getting him to, okay, say like, let's do it together. You put in one thing that you want, we put in another thing that you want. Then the child was a little more accommodative. So similarly, again, because we don't have enough time, we can't go through all of it, but anything that we want the child to learn, that we start to introduce it using things that the child finds most exciting, that the child, might want to try again on their own. This is just one example of, say stories, right? So if this is a story dice, and then, the child has to make stories based on the images that he sees on top. And I don't know if you can see it, I've zoomed in. The child's written that the boy was in the city, he was telling Z. See, he sees the image of the child sleeping. He looks at it as just the child saying Z, because the key was lost. He's jumped up from here to there to the key. 17th April, which he got confused with that particular date. So he suddenly remembered the date he put it by opening the key with the cupboard. He confused the book for the cupboard. So here again, we used mediated learning experience to get the child to think about, again, this is not exactly how we would do it. We would do a lot more. Sorry, I'm just, yeah. So just again, this is not the only mediation we did. We would do more, help the child to think about, how a story is built. And then this is the story that he came up with later. So he threw the dice. He came up with a new set of dice. It just moved around a bit. And he actually was able to say the child is sad because his, house is on fire. You see that? The flower also died. So now he's using all the details in the story. The turtle also died. The flower also died. And the thief, he actually used that mask as a thief, came to steal books, and he got caught in the fire. The police came and he got caught, tried to steal books and food. So the apple was also included. And the police came and put him in prison. He looked at the castle as a prison, which is still fair enough. But you see how the child, it's still not very perfect if you look at everything, but now the child understands that, how he needs to connect to all of it. This is again just another example. Very often how our children look at information very literally, that because he's got his hand on his ear, he said here. So this was an empty comic strip, and we were hoping for the child to think about what the children are saying to one another. So the other one has the girl pointing to, so he wrote and then the girls, raising her son. So she said scream. He said scream. And this is post mediation, right? I am sitting on glass, of course, spelling errors, that's okay. I can raise my hand, but actually she's pointing to the sky, but still there's a sentence where, she's actually, the child's actually explaining what the girl's doing. And when she turned, excuse me, and while the boy is sweating, she still identified and he said, why am I crying? So still there is, quite a bit of disconnect, but there's a lot more connect compared to what you saw earlier. Ending in, I just want to, again, come back to where we said about enabling happy connections. That so decades ago, and educator L.B. Sharp suggested that if we do not fill the time of a young person with things that are fun and exciting and are good for him or her, they will still find ways to fill their time with things that are fun and exciting, but maybe not good for them. So it is our duty to find the strength in each person and use that to develop the learning experience that they can take forward on their own, use it to, think more than, so we don't want our children and, the individuals to just be doers. So you tell them something, they will do it. If you ask them something, they will do it. They're expected to do something, they will do it. If you prompt them, they will do it. If you instruct them, they will do it. We want them to move from doers to thinkers, right? We want them to be able to think for themselves and use that thinking to develop their own ideas, develop their own opinions, be able to share that with others, and develop into independent learners. So that's about what I have to share today. I hope you would go back and, just like I said, think about the learning process, think about mediated learning experience. And, there's lots of information out there, but if anyone wants to know a little more about it, you can always reach out to me and I'll be happy to answer any questions that you have. So we have one question I see. What will be the prognosis after 5 years in an autistic child? I'm sorry if I don't have a good enough answer for that. I don't know if other therapists or professionals have said the same thing to you, but there is really no specific timeline of prognosis. It really depends on how early intervention was started, what kind of challenges the child has, how much of intervention was provided, what the child's level is at. So there's a lot of variables, a lot of factors involved. So it's not a straightforward answer that I can give you to say that this is how much or this is how far the child will move after 5 years. So I'm sorry, I'm not, I don't have a better answer for that question. Do we have any other questions? I can wait for a couple of minutes. So thank you for being part of this session. And I really hope, I was able to get you thinking a little more in terms of how we can make the entire learning process more fun for the children, for us, for the learner, for the adults. And that's what's important, that, we pay attention to the process and not just focus on the end result and getting to the end. So thank you very much and good luck to everyone. Good night. I have some comments saying the session was informative. Thank you. Like I said, if you have any more questions, you can always ask me. I have one more question. How to use theory of mind in learning? Okay, so that's again a very big topic, and I don't know if Autism Connect has already had a session on it, but it's definitely a session that we should be having. Um, it's very hard to answer that so quickly. But yes, the mediated learning experience is about, you remember I said, the theory of mind is where a lot of individuals on the autism spectrum have challenge tuning in with others. They're not able to see the other person's perspective. It's very hard for them to understand that what I see and what you see when we're looking at the same thing could be very different. So that is, where that theory of mind and that's where they have challenge in, social relationships, connecting to people, maintaining friendships. So remember we said when we're talking about mediated learning experience, that meaning, getting them to understand the meaning of things, getting them to understand the whole process of what, it is. So if it's um, making friends or if it's being in a social situation, it's important that we just don't give them the instructions of don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. We need to be able to help them go through the process of what's happening and get understanding what they perceive of that whole thing and what's making it difficult for them. So you and using the transcendence to help them slowly connect. So theory of mind is a big area that we need to look more into, and I would definitely recommend Autism Connect to have more sessions on that. So I'm sorry I'm not able to spend enough time running through the whole thing.